chapter 14, look at verse 22 through 27.
Yes.
Matthew 14, verse 22 through 27. No, let's stop at verse 25. Okay, 22 through 25. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. When the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. Check this. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on. That word on is very important. Walking on the sea. Let me talk for a few minutes about a word for those who trust God. Yes. Wonder are there any people here today that trust God? Well, I know you do. Word for those who trust God. Sometimes we need an encouraging word. Sometimes it's good for somebody to refresh our thoughts and our memories that God said he would never leave us nor forsake us. Yes. Amen. Now, in order for us to get a proper understanding of this story here in Matthew, it's important that we go back to the beginning of the Bible, back to the opening verses in Genesis. We need to go back and we'll find that when we go back to Genesis, and actually I want you to go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. We'll read that in just a few minutes. But when we go there, we'll discover that the author is presenting a clear theological understanding of our human existence. Maybe we don't understand, maybe we don't fully realize why we go through so many trials, so many challenges, so many changes, but from a theological outlook, we can understand from these verses that God has made somewhat difficult our human existence. In these verses, you'll find, let me read those verses for you real quick. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face light, there's the dispelling of darkness. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And that God didn't destroy darkness. He just put it in a channel as to where he could control it. You see, God doesn't have to destroy everything that come against his children. God wants us to know that he's a creating and controlling God. Now look what God, it wasn't nothing but darkness. Yes. And God spoke and said, let there be light. And then verse 5, notice what it said, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. All right? So now, I want us to understand that God, and without him, there is nothing but an empty void. There is chaos and darkness. But that's without God. But with God's powerful presence, notice, as foretold here in chapter 1 of Genesis, that there is creative life and light in his creative presence. Now, notice the sea, and especially the storm at sea. It conjured up for the Hebrew people visions of this original state of terror and chaos before God stepped out on nothing. Before he came out of nowhere, this is what he was confronted with. Darkness, void, chaos, all of this. And so the Hebrew people knew about this, and they understood this as foretold in their Hebrew scriptures. You see, now here's the thing about the Hebrew people. They weren't a seafaring nation. And so these savage storms that ravaged them by rushing down upon the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean Sea seemed to attack the very order of nature itself. They felt powerless. They felt tossed around by forces that they could neither predict or control. And isn't it a strange feeling when we are confronted with situations that are beyond our control? How do you feel? How do you feel now? For several months, we've been dealing with COVID-19. Our privileges have been taken away, and for many people, they're saying that their rights are being infringed upon, but they're dealing with something that they are powerless with, because the more they struggle about with their freedoms, with their privileges, with their rights, things don't get any better, they just seem to get worse. And so when we can't predict what's happening, or when we can't control what's happening, it really makes us feel powerless. And we are powerless because we are not the creator. And so this was the state of things before the intervention. You have to understand that at some point in our lives, at some point in our story that we are writing, we have to understand that we have to have God's intervention. If God don't intervene, then it's going to be total chaos. And it's into this primeval chaos, the creating and ordering hand of God came, as you see in Genesis chapter 1. It was the creative and ordering hand of God that intervened. But notice also that when God saw the darkness, when he saw the void, the deed, the empty deed, notice that God didn't destroy the darkness. Neither did he cause the angry deed to dry up. He just controlled it with his controlling hand. See, God has a way of dealing with situations that come against his children. He doesn't have to destroy everything. He can control it. You see, God don't have to destroy COVID-19 or the people that caused it. God can control it and them. You need to understand that he's the one who is in control. So now, Matthew, going down text, who was the most Jewish of the gospel writers, would have been well aware of this background to the storm at sea, and the way he has written his account highlights some of the exciting insights into our human existence. In our story, we have both of these elements, water and darkness. And both of them are raging around Jesus' disciples. They know where they want to be. And I'm sure that some of us feel like that even today. We know where we'd like to be. They wanted to be on the other side, on the far side of the lake, having a rendezvous with Jesus. But in spite of their efforts, they're not making much progress. You know how they battle the storm, don't you? They've been working hard all night trying to control the boat. They couldn't control the storm, but they tried to control the crowd that was caught in the storm. They're not making any progress. Though they've been working hard all night, they're not getting anywhere. They rowed as hard as they could, and they was pushed back. And I know there are songs in our culture that says to this effect, I told the storm, but I'm going to tell you something, you can't tell the storm nothing. God is the one that has to speak to the storm in our life. And so in this fourth watch, that's what happened. In the fourth watch of the night, fourth watch is between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock a.m. In the morning, just as the night was ending, Jesus came to them. Watch this. He was not walking in the water, but he was walking on the water. The storm that was causing so much strife, so much damage, so much unbelief. The storm that was raging, the billows that were beating against the ship, and that was causing them so much heartache. Jesus wasn't in the storm. Thank God he was over the storm. Amen. Now, Jesus was walking over the top of the water. That was proving to be such a threat to the men in the ship. All right? Here it is. It's a threat to them. It's ravishing them. They're having to unload, throw too much stuff overboard so that they could get control. And they were sure that they were going to perish. And that same storm that was befetting them, here Jesus come walking over that storm. Aren't you glad Jesus is in control of the storm? Well, I want us to see this beautiful picture of the Son of God coming to the disciples in distress. And how he gets to them is that he comes to them over the storm. Thing that's causing them all of this grief. Things that's causing their hearts to wilter and their faith to wither. He's walking over the storm, on top of the storm. Y'all going with me? Now, the extraordinary thing about this story is that here comes God's Son, coming to them, walking on the storm. Can I just say riding on the storm? And they didn't recognize who he was. But worse than that, some of them even thought that he was a ghost. Now, it is the response of Jesus that is significant at this particular point, because Jesus does not. Now that would have been a good time if he's coming to me to help me. If he's coming to me to get me out of this state of chaos, that would have been a good time for him to prove himself to me by calming the storm. Wouldn't that have been a good time for you if he would have said to the storm, be still? That would have, if I'd have been caught out in that storm, I'll tell you, I'd have been happy with that. But he doesn't calm the storm. He doesn't even still the waves. He acts like the storm is non-existent. Matter of fact, he doesn't do anything to take away the forces that are working against the disciples. He doesn't do any of that stuff. And you do know that he had power. He could have spoken to the wind. Because somewhere else in the Bible, people wondered, what kind of man is he? That even the wind and the waves obey him. But at this point, it seemed like when they needed him most, he doesn't do what we would have expected him to do. And I think that Jesus was teaching a lesson here that his disciples had to learn. And listen, it would be good for us to learn that lesson as well. Jesus, watch him. He doesn't take away he doesn't calm the waves. He doesn't calm the storm. He doesn't even take away the forces that are threatening the disciples. And notice, the only thing he says to his disciples, and incidentally, this is how they would know that it was him instead of the ghost. This is how they would know. See, some things we give somebody else credit for what God's doing.
All right.
How many times will God bless you? And you know that maybe you don't know because you don't give him the credit. You say, well, you know, I got lucky. You were at the casino and you hit the jackpot. You were doing the scratch-offs and you got that big jackpot and you said, well, I got lucky. You don't really know who it was that blessed you. And see, how many know God has a way of taking from those who have and giving to those who have need? And so Jesus doesn't do all of that stuff. Matter of fact, if he had said, wind, be still, storm, be quiet. Some of those boastful people on the boat, because I know Peter was on there, and he was very boastful, he might have said, look what we did. Fellas, we got control of this storm. So Jesus doesn't do that at this particular point. What he does say to his disciples, and this is a good word for us, even in the midst of this storm, even in the midst of this pandemic, let me just tell us what Jesus said. Jesus said, take courage.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Why? Here it is, a storm about the size of a hurricane. And Jesus says, take courage.
Yes.
Why should I take courage? Watch what he said. Because it's me. I'm not a ghost. I'm not a figment of your imagination.
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes.
So if I'm here,
Yes.
don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Why are you going to worry? Why are you going to fret if the Lord is with you?
That's right.
It's here at this point in this passage that Matthew goes straight to the heart of biblical spirituality. For Jesus seems to stress the point that there is no need to fear. No need to fear anything. No need to fear the wind. No need to fear the wave. No need to fear COVID-19 and coronavirus. No need to fear whatever you're dealing with if I'm with you.
All right.
If I'm with you. Now, it's your part. You have to play your part. You have to make sure that he's with you always. Now, notice his first action is not to calm the storm, but it's to remind them that if they focus their attention on him, they would not be so concerned about the storm. How many know that Peter is going to give us a lesson here in a minute? Because he's going to get an opportunity to really do what Jesus is doing. Watch this. While the storm, with all of its fury, is hindering their progress. Notice the storm is unable to stop Jesus from coming to them. They're out in the middle of the sea and they're being buffeted by the storm. But Jesus didn't have to wait till the rain stopped falling. He didn't have to find the shelter from the storm. He is the shelter. And Jesus came to them walking
Yes, sir.
on the storm.
Yes, sir.
Can I get a witness? Yeah, how many know that when God is with us,
Yes, yes,
there's no need to fear,
yes.
even though there are things that rage around us and are seeking to drag us down. You don't have to fear because God is with us.
Yes.
That word, Emmanuel.
Yes.
You know when they said you call him Emmanuel, that means God with us. He'll come to us in the midst of our storm.
Yes.
Even while the storms are raging. There was a song back in the day when the storm of life are raging.
Stand by me.
Stand by me. Have anybody asked you to do that lately? If you're with us, then I know you can stand by. And so notice, he came and stood in the midst of the storm with thee. How many know that God don't have to take us out of the storm, but he'll stand with us in our storm. And if God is with us in the storm, that's just as good as him being in charge over the storm. I'm closing here. They could see no point, tell you the truth, of having a God who would not remove the storm. For that's what they wanted him to do. They wanted him to steal the storm. They wanted him to get them out of their trouble. You know, we have expectations of God. God don't always do what we expect him to do. And the reason why God doesn't always do what we expect him to do, because God is pruning us. Sometimes he's pruning us, trying to get us to let him be God. How many know if God is God, we ought to let him be God? I wouldn't have a God that I had to tell what to do. If I had to tell him what to do, when to move, what trouble I was in, then he wouldn't be the kind of God that I needed. We need a God that will be God all by himself. Y'all gonna pray with me? They couldn't see no point in having a God who would not remove the storm. But I'm glad that every once in a while we have to let God be God. And we have to be of good courage. Sometimes we have to have patience and wait on him. May not come when you want him to come. But Grandma said he's always on time. Y'all ain't gonna pray with me. And they were not prepared to let God be God. If they had been prepared to let God be God, nobody on the boat would have looked out and said, y'all, is this not enough trouble? There's the ghost coming at us on the water. If they knew that God was God all by himself, then they wouldn't be worried and they wouldn't have been afraid. They would have known that whatever shape we're in, whatever our condition is, God will come through on time. I wonder if there's anybody here today that knows God will on time. Well, I hear Peter. You know, Peter never had the choice of words. Peter always talked powerful and boastful. Peter said, Lord, if, watch this. Now, all he had to do was listen to what the Lord said. The Lord said, be of good cheer. Don't be afraid. It's me. I'm with you. Peter said, well, if that's you, if you're really you and not a ghost, prove it. Prove it to me. How do you want me to prove it, Peter? If it's really you, let me come to you on the water. Now watch this. Watch this. Watch this. Here Peter is in the boat, afraid of the storm. But now, because he wanted to prove a point, he was not afraid to get out of the only security that he had and step out on the storm. Peter said that if it's really you, bid me to come. And I want to come to you walking on the water. I don't want to swim. I don't want a dog paddle. I want to come to you walking just like you are. And I heard Jesus say, come on, Peter. And Peter began to walk on the water. Can I get him in there? Peter walked on the water undisturbed. Now, he was worried in the boat. But he is out in the middle of the sea, walking on the waves that were crashing up against the boat. And he not even disturbed about it. Can I tell you the reason Peter wasn't disturbed? He wasn't disturbed because instead of looking at the waves, instead of looking at the billow roll, he kept his eye on Jesus. And oh, my brothers and my sisters, I tell you, you'll be all right if you keep your eye on Jesus. You keep your eye on him. No matter what goes on around you, everything will be all right. Don't look around at your problem. Don't look around at what you predict to happen. Keep your eye on the problem solver. There's a problem solver whose name is Jesus. Keep your eye on him. He'll make everything all right. I told somebody the other day, you know, we go everywhere and do everything that we're big enough and bad enough to do. We're still throwing parties. We're still having dinners and all kinds of gatherings. But we're afraid to come to church and take our eyes off of Jesus. We need to keep our eyes on him. I heard him say, if you look to the hill, which cometh to help, all my help comes from the Lord. I'm so glad today. I'm so glad. All my help comes from the Lord. Look at old Peter walking out on the water, but something happened. He took his eyes off of Jesus. When he took his eyes off of Jesus, he began to sing, oh, my brother and my sister, keep your eyes He's able to make a way out of no way. He's able to heal, save, and deliver. Keep your eyes on him. Anybody know he's all right? Anybody know he's all right? If you know he's all right, say yeah. Yeah. I'm glad Jesus was there. Oh, Peter's sake. Because when Peter took his eyes off of him, he went there, started to sing. He recognized who he was then, didn't he? He didn't say, "Oh, Ghost, save me." He recognized who he was. He said, "Lord, save me." There are some things that prepare us to know who Jesus is. Peter recognized who he was and said, "Lord, save me." Jesus stretched forth his hand. I'm closing here. Stretched forth his hand, caught him by the hand, and lifted him up. Watch this. Watch this. They went on and stepped in the ship. Guess what happened when they got on board the ship? When they got on the ship, the storm didn't cease until they got on the ship. Oh, I'm telling you, somebody needs to get back on board. Trouble in your life, trouble in your family, situations beyond your control because you stepped out of the ship thinking you can do it on your own. But you need to say to him, "Lord, save me," and let him help you get back in the ship again. When he did that, doors of the church opened. When he did that, the storm ceased. Oh yeah. I don't know when. I don't know how he's going to do it. But I just have a feeling that the Lord is going to fix it. Whatever we're dealing with, whatever we're going through, anybody here know that the Lord is going to fix it? Is there one today?